In the multitude of counsel, there is safety. Welcome to the All Things Done podcast, a vision inspired by the truth found in God's Word and designed to inform, educate, and impact you in every way. My name is Adeyelu, and I am your host. Join us as we embark on a journey to becoming a better version of ourselves.
So please, let's go ahead. You can introduce yourself, and then I will go after.
Okay, very quickly, thank you very much, Timmy, for this opportunity to have this conversation with you. My name is Emmanuel Stephen Oluwasho, and you have my bio. So, very quickly, that's what I like to identify myself with. Briefly, I am a dyslexia advocate. Every other thing is reserved for, as much as this conversation is concerned. I'm a dyslexia advocate and advocates for the rights of people with dyslexia in Nigeria. And I'm privileged to be the founding director of Inclusive Classroom Nigeria. And our work is also centered on this to provide early and crisis intervention to kids with learning disabilities. So that's what I do, and that's who I am. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so for me, my name is Temitope. I am primarily an engineer, but I got into dyslexia advocacy in 2020. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, so I love children. I've always worked with children. I've been working with children since I was 15. So I teach in the children's church of the children's department of my church. And then that was where my love for children came from. And then when I learned about how there were some children that wouldn't even understand the Bible I was teaching because of dyslexia, I decided to start to speak up about it. So very nice to meet you again, sir. And briefly, I would like you to talk a little bit about what got you into like the world of dyslexia awareness. When did it all start for you? Was it that you met a child? Like just briefly, how did the whole dyslexia awareness, dyslexia advocate journey start for you?
All right, that's a very good question. It all started in the year 2020. That was the year of the pandemic, generally globally. And one thing led to the other, and that's what I'm going to explain very quickly. I had just come back from service in 2019, the NYC. So, and prior to my service here, I'd been doing research and all of that. So I just wanted something different. I wanted a different form of research. Yes, I'd investigated on emotional intelligence, self-esteem. Those were my area of researches, and I've published quite extensively on that. So I wanted something more practical, something I could relate with. So I was just on the internet, just trying to look forward, just learning as my personal routine is. And then on LinkedIn, I stumbled on just the word dyslexia, and someone was saying something about it. And I was like, okay, what is it? Then in a spirit of inquisition, I tried looking up on Google, and I found out that, oh, wow, it's a learning disability. And my first degree is in guidance and counseling. So I was like, how did I study guidance and counseling for 4 years in the university, and I never came across this term? So what is it about it? And so I learned, and the more I read more, the more I got interested. And I was like, okay, can I just know more about this? Unfortunately, I couldn't get more information. So I just felt that should be the same plight of many other people. So many misinformation out there. And I was like, okay, can I just get the appropriate information? And so interestingly, I got to connect with someone on LinkedIn, and that was who eventually became a very good friend. And so he was doing a lot of webinars. He was presenting across the world on that subject. And I was like, okay, I'll attend some of his webinars. And then when I attended, I discovered that, wow, there's a lot of gap I needed to know, and how much more many educators and many people in the country. So that should be June, I connected with a friend on LinkedIn, and then we just got talking, and I just shared my passion with her, and she was like, okay, yeah, Stephen, let's create an awareness. And together with my friend, who was very new to me, then we hosted the first dyslexia webinar in Nigeria, and that was massive. And we got so many participants around the world, and that was how the world started. So we had a conversation. Some other stakeholders from Nigeria came around and we're like, wow, yes, we've heard. Okay, some said we've never heard. And so should I say the communique for that webinar was that we should not stop. We should keep creating more awareness. We should keep doing the good work that was perceived at that time. So in that light, we had to host another webinar just shortly after that, and that was for teacher training, because we identified clearly that teachers need to know about this and they need to spread the word. We could not reach everyone, and apparently and logistically we could not. So obviously, if we had to reach more teachers, we should more pupils and students, we should reach more teachers. And so we hosted that webinar, and prior to hosting that webinar, I knew the way things work. So I said, okay, I needed to create a structure for this, because I don't just have to be passionate about this, and I needed to have a structure to get this done. So I registered in Inclusive Classroom Nigeria and got registered, got my papers, and that was what led to the next webinar for teaching and training teachers on inclusive classroom practices. And to be honest with you, I do not have all of the skills. So at the second webinar, I knew I could not be a speaker. So I needed to have someone who is well experienced to be the speaker while I still keep learning myself. So I had to reach out to Professor Catherine, who had been very helpful too. So she connected from Race University in Canada, and we had a webinar, and it was a success too. So interestingly, most of our webinars had always been graced by participants locally and internationally. So that's broadened my horizon. And people keep saying, okay, Stephen, I think you need to do more about this. But I needed to be true to myself. I said, okay, yes, I know I needed to share more news. I needed to do more, but I do not have enough information myself. So I'm as ignorant as many of the teachers out there. So it's better I get information about this. So, and that's what led me to the introduction course. And then after that, I signed up to become an associate. And then currently I'm on my practicum. So very soon I should complete my associate level and then getting ready for my certified level. So that's what led me to all of this. And I think in the same year, we hosted another webinar. At this time, that year, that was practically 2 years ago, we had to say, okay, we need to bring in dyslexia advocates from all around the world. And so I partnered with my friend, and we started this together, and that's Martin Bloomfield. So Inclusive Classroom Nigeria, in collaboration with Dyslexia Bytes, we had to start an awareness program to say, okay, we needed to reach out to more teachers. And so we connected. It's called, Dyslexia Awareness, the next stage for African collaborators. So we had to connect with dyslexia advocates around the continent, and then we had such a very great time in that webinar. So about the webinar, I said enough of webinars, because majority of the participants are not even people I could access instantly. So let's deal with my immediate community. And so that's why I said, okay, now we're gonna stop webinars for now, and let's just start reaching out to the communities. So we had to take a step forward with Inclusive Classroom Nigeria. The lessons I'm learning on the science of reading from the Orton-Gillingham training. So I started training teachers personally without any form of media publicity, and then reaching out to schools. So I go to schools in underserved communities, just train the teachers if the time comes, or directly impacting the pupils. So I only do that twice a week. Currently now, I only do that twice a week because of other commitments. So just go to those schools. There's a curriculum already with my, sometimes with my volunteers, and sometimes I just have to do that because of logistics reasons. So my volunteers, we keep having training on the basics of dyslexia and then the science of reading, essentially, so as to be able to empower other teachers and get the work done. Thank you.
Wow. I'm super impressed. One thing I think I picked up from everything you said is that you're a go-getter. Like you see something and then you decide you want to do it and you just go at it. And I think that's a very beautiful attribute to have as a person. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for your kind words.
You're welcome. So now that we know how the whole story started from, could you just give us and we now know that you're now you're working, you are now an associate and you're working on getting your certificate. I would like you to, tell us in lay terms, just for the general public, what exactly is dyslexia? We don't want big words, though. We want watered down definition. See if you can do that for us.
Okay, well, yes, I want to say I needed to be very careful with this because in this month, the Dyslexia Awareness Month, I created a particular strategy to reach out to people in their main language. So one of the things I said in one of those posts was to say, your pidgin knows sabi read. So if you be like saying get dyslexia, that's the pidgin explanation. That is a child who is struggling to read. Now, dyslexia is not the only reading disability that exists out there, but essentially, most of our kids who struggle to read are actually showing symptoms of dyslexia. That's the first. Then the second is in the Yoruba explanation is to say that so that's just dyslexia. So essentially, you should know that. Then you should go for screening. Yes, eventually by the time you screen, it may or may not be dyslexia, but should I say 9 in 10 eventually turns out to have dyslexia. So what I'm saying in nutshell is inability to be able to read. And this does not have to relate with intelligence. The child is smart. The child does not have any issue with his or her eyes. Everything is perfect, but still struggles to read. It's a symptom of dyslexia. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome, sir. So you're saying that if somebody cannot read, what if sometimes people can say, or as if he doesn't want to read me, it's laziness that is doing him now. So where do we draw the line between, because in actual fact, there are some of our children that actually they're lazy, they don't want to read their book, and they just don't want to, they just don't like the idea of study. So where do we draw the line between a child being lazy and not just wanting to study, and a child that is actually struggling with studying? So where do we draw that without going for any test right now?
So when we almost all the time that's nothing to do with this laziness. It has nothing to do with laziness. So apparently it's not about laziness, it's not about intelligence. The child is struggling as much as he could or she could, but finding it difficult, because I needed to clarify that it has been a challenge to me too, because there is no universally acceptable definition of dyslexia, and that was why I tried to explain in our basic languages as much as the two I can speak. So that's to say that, number one, dyslexia is a disability. Yes, apparently we have so many, movement now saying dyslexia is not a disability, it's a difference, or to say dyslexia is a superpower and all of that. Yes, I as much as I try to appreciate that and acknowledge that, I also needed to clarify that it is classified as a disability from the outset, because just like the word dyslexia, so disability with words, all right? So now that's words jumping. No, it's not about, a child sees a word. One of the things I used to try to clarify about our people is a movie called like Stars on Net, Every Child is Special. Many times people associate that movie to dyslexia. And to be honest, one of the principal, characteristics they see about the boy is not a characteristics of a dyslexic kid. That is called Island syndrome. Island syndrome, IRLEN syndrome. So dyslexics do not see words jumping around. Dyslexics do not need any color overlay, and we needed to get this word out, because I also see many dyslexia advocates saying this, that okay, dyslexic kids, they see words jumping around. If you put a color over things, it will help them. If you give them some glasses, I've seen international organizations reaching out to me to say, okay, there are some games they will give to dyslexic kids and they will help them, brain training and all of that. Yes, appreciably, things like that have been used in many parts of the world. But when we go by research, there's little research to confirm that. So the way we understand research is that dyslexia is a neurological difficulty, if I don't want to use the word disability. So it's about the brain, all right? Yeah. And then it says, another thing we could also say, it is phonological in nature. So it's about a child having difficulty with the way to sound phonemes, to be able to sound out letters in words. So it has nothing to do with the eyes, the sight, and all of that. So now, apparently, a child may not be lazy, a child may be lazy, but that has nothing to do with dyslexia. So what we're saying is, whether the child is lazy or not, the child may have dyslexia, and that what we should focus on is not about the laziness, but about the presence of that difference, if I may continue to use the word difference. Thank you.
All right, so thank you so much. So I would like us to also talk about, how do people actually, like, dyslexia, is it contagious? Is it if I stay around somebody that has dyslexia, can like the disorder jump from that person's brain to my own? So how do people actually get dyslexia? And yeah, that's the question.
All right, thank you for that question. Dyslexia is not a communicable disease. So that's the first. So it's not something that jumps on other people. It's something that it's hereditary. I must admit that it is hereditary. So there are chances that if a sibling has dyslexia, if a parent has dyslexia, may run in the family. We had webinars whereby people acknowledge that, yes, these are the realities. And when we do dyslexia assessments, this is one of the questions, demographic questions, we try to check through. Now, that being said, you cannot sit next to someone or two pupils in the class, then one is dyslexic and the other is not, and then it spreads. No. And then it's not also a product of, I know you have not asked that, but let me also clarify, it's not a product of poor teaching. That is because the teacher cannot teach. That's why this child is having dyslexia. No, the child may have dyslexia, and then apparently, probably what is going on with the child, that is the teacher inability to be able to provide enough resource, may not be able to help the child, but that is not to say that that is the cause of the dyslexia. So that's just to explain that it has nothing to do with external factors. External factors may trigger it. External factors may make it difficult to resolve issues like that, but that is not. Factors are actually the causes of dyslexia. Thank you.
All right. So if I can summarize, one of the basic ways a person can get dyslexia is through hereditary. Like, if a parent has dyslexia, there's a possible chance that the child would also have it. All right, thank you so much. So yes, we've been talking about how if one sees that a child is struggling with reading, it's best that you check whether or not he or she has dyslexia. So, but how do we go about that? So assuming I know somebody that's struggling with reading, how do I go about ensuring or verifying that the person has dyslexia? What are the steps I'm supposed to take?
Okay, that's the one challenge with dyslexia, is that it's not something that you could just conclude. I've seen people concluding a lot, especially with dyslexia and some other popular disabilities. The child is not reading, that's dyslexia and all of that. No. One basic thing I keep saying to educators is, for us at Inclusive Classroom Nigeria, we provide a simple assessment. So if a child is finding it difficult to read, we can just screen and assess the child. So essentially, and that is not a diagnosis. I needed to also clarify that you have to get a practical head psych diagnosis. We don't do that, admittedly, but we do screening and we do assessment. So if the result of the screening and the assessment shows symptoms of dyslexia, or shows that possibly there's a presence of dyslexia, then that is what we can improve on. But if we don't have anything like that, then apparently not. So we don't conclude this until the child has been assessed, or simply just screened, just simple screeners.
If an assessment is done and there are symptoms of, like, the child is showing symptoms, the result shows that there are symptoms of dyslexia, what then is the next step? Do I go to a doctor? What kind of, if you have issues with your eye, you probably go to an optician. So in this case, where I've taken an assessment from Inclusive Nigeria, and I want to be diagnosed, what is the step I'm going to take?
Okay, that's a very brilliant question. After assessment and screening, and then you want to go for diagnosis, we have partners that we partner with that we could always refer. But I need to clarify, and I don't want to, this is not a promotional conversation, so I don't want to come up with that. But I need to always clarify that it's not about matching boxes and doing more of this brain training. And no offense, I'm not trying to label any organization or anyone, but dyslexia is much more beyond that. So it's not about saying that it's not something that will be cured. And that's another thing I need to clarify. I wish there could be a graphical presentation and you could see fMRI studies, that's functional magnetic resonance imaging, practical studies have shown that the brain of a dyslexic is that different from a non-dyslexic. So it's not about brain correction. It's not about all of that. What happens is that when the child is exposed to efficient, what some people call structured literacy, we discover that there is a change in the brain. So that is, it also has to go through the right process. That is the teaching in the right process. It's not a quick fix method that then the child just picks up. And it's not something about home lesson or extra lessons. No, it's not about doing more. It's about doing the right thing. So I work with a couple of students, and the parents keep saying, oh, the child is not reading. No, it's not about that. You have to go through the foundation. And most times you have to go through the foundation, the pillars of reading. And most times we even have to start with the alphabetic principles and then understand the weights. It all goes through that. So I keep emphasizing that even in the process of getting diagnosis, you must be careful to ensure that you get it with the right source. So one major source I always refer that you can always get the right information about dyslexia is, okay, let me mention two. There are a number of that, but let me mention two. One is the International Dyslexia Association. The International Dyslexia Association provides valid information about dyslexia and all of the questions you may want to know. And the next is Reading Rockets for educators. You could also get a very good information from that. So essentially what we're saying is this, you must be careful also when you're trying to get information about dyslexia, when you're trying to get resources. It's very, very important. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. So I would want us to still talk a little bit about, you have been mentioning the symptoms of, like you've been saying the word symptoms of dyslexia. And I know from what you said so far, I know struggling to read is one of the major symptoms. But are there any other thing that we can look out for that can point us towards the fact that a child might have dyslexia or an adult might have dyslexia, apart from struggling to read? Are there any other symptoms that comes with having dyslexia?
I wish they were. I sincerely wish they were, and it would have helped us better, but they are not sufficient to be considered as causes of, as symptoms of dyslexia. So for example, one of such popular one is when an individual, probably a child, is writing B as D or writing P, as Q and all of that. Yes, those are very good things, but reversals are one of the ways by which every young learner is something that happens to almost every young learner. So that's not sufficient. But when it continues, at grade 1, a child is expected to, okay, I conducted a survey and majority of the teachers believe that a child should be able to read from grade 3. So if we use grade 3 to peg it, so a child is struggling to read at grade 3 may be showing symptoms of dyslexia. And an adult who has been exposed to the basics of reading and still struggle to read, I work with, currently I have just one left. I've met adults that we're supposed to work with the guy together, but because of commitments of adulthood and the labor of some of them continue. So, but I still have one who is still active, and apparently she had been taught, and in fact, she's through with secondary school, and up till now, she still does not read. So we are still working on her. So what we're saying is that I wish there were other things I could just okay because I am from social cultural group and all of that. This may be the symptoms, or this may be the reason. But practically, it has to all go back to phonological awareness. So, for example, you have to do testing on phonemic awareness and phonological awareness to understand So what everybody can do with rhyming, someone who has dyslexia may find it very difficult to do. What someone can do with blending and all of that, someone with dyslexia may find it difficult. So those phonological awareness activities would definitely be difficult. Another thing we also do is rapid automatic naming. So it's called RAN. So many times for both adults and young adults, they find it very difficult to do things like that. So we already know that these are indicators and they are not sufficient, just like as I have said, until a proper diagnosis is done. Thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I would also want to ask, when you see someone wearing glasses, you know that the person has an issue with their eye. But there are different variations of eye problems. We have short-sightedness, long-sightedness. And so is that a situation in dyslexia? Do we have different variations of dyslexia? Are there different types of dyslexia?
Okay, yes, apparently there are severities. So some are severely dyslexic. So for example, a kid that we've been working on for 2 years and then the kid is still finding it difficult to read. So that's severely dyslexic. And some are mildly, mild. So some dyslexia is just mild. So they may struggle with some things, but not with other things. And then we also need to consider the comorbidity. Most times dyslexia comorbids with one major learning disability, which is ADHD. And interestingly, both are celebrated on the same month. Actually, October is neurodiversity month, so many neurodiversity issues are celebrated in October, but ADHD and dyslexia receives much more attention. So sometimes some individuals who are dyslexic may also have symptoms of dyspraxia or dyscalculia. So what I'm saying that just to clarify what I mean by severity. Sometimes the severity may not just be about dyslexia, may also be that the child also have symptoms of other learning disability that is impinging on the current work that we're doing regarding dyslexia. Thank you.
So you have spoken about how dyslexia can be treated, but can it be cured? Is it something that how you've mentioned that you can work on some people and you use the right techniques and they learn to read? So when they learn to read, does it mean that the dyslexia they have has been cured, or they've just found a way to just live with it? So can dyslexia be cured?
I'm sorry, I did not get the question, but I think the part I got clearly was the part of dyslexia being cured.
Yes, so I was asking that
dyslexia cannot be cured.
Okay,
but it may be remediated. The term is remediation. So a dyslexic kid may be remediated. So dyslexia may be remediated. So that the process is what we call remediation. So that implies if you run an fMRI scan on the brain of a dyslexic individual, you will discover that the brain, there's a change like after remediation. So that's what happens eventually. But that does not mean the person is no longer dyslexic. The person is still dyslexic, but the person is still able to do what every other person who is not dyslexic can do. But that does not change it in the reality.
Then we're rounding up quickly, and one of my last questions will be, can a dyslexic person actually have like a normal life? You mentioned that now you said it cannot be cured, but it can be remediated. So does that allow them have a normal life? They go at whatever it is they want to do, and dyslexia is no longer a problem for them, and they can do whatever it is they want to do.
Okay, I may not know what you normality is actually a very relative term. So if your definition of normality is the ability to be able to function well, just relate with everybody and do things as expected, and then I can say confidently that yes, every dyslexic individual has the opportunity to be able to live every life they dream of and be fine. So without any challenge, without any difficulty. So it's the presence of dyslexia does not mean that the person will not be able to work well or not be able to relate well. In fact, some studies have proven that individuals with dyslexia also have some other strengths So, which has led to that movement that is called, the positivity of dyslexia, which they refer to as dyslexia is my superpower. So, individuals with dyslexia sometimes are even able to see some things that other individuals have not been able to see, because they are very good scientists, they are very good observers, they are very good at calculating things. They may find it difficult to read, they may find it difficult to do some basic things that has to do with words, but they are very good with other areas. So, and that does not mean they will not be able to be, they are not good at sports. In fact, they excel at sports and many other areas. So, unlike some physical disability that may impinge on their lifestyle, dyslexia may never impinge on some individuals' lifestyle because it's a learning disability. And then with remediation and appropriate accommodation, the kid is good to go. Or the individual, let me know always use kids. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. My last question now will be, you mentioned that you are currently undergoing training. So perhaps someone like me too, I want to be able to train people on teaching dyslexics, and I want to, have all the skills needed to support a dyslexic child. Where do you think I can go to get that training? So perhaps there's somebody listening to us right now, and probably maybe a parent that thinks that their child has dyslexia and they want to have the skills to be able to, work with that child. What would you advise that person would do?
Okay, yes, good question. My training I've been on it's called the Orton-Gillingham training. So it is not cheap. Going by our exchange rates, very expensive. I am privileged to get funding, and then also, I got funding to get it done. So literally, that is the gold standard of reading. That is referred to as the gold standard of reading. It's been on research proven. The AOGPE has been on for that should be about 30 years now. The program, one of the psychologists who founded the term dyslexia is Samuel Orton, and he is one of the people who actually founded this process. And it's not. How do I explain? It's not a program. The Orton-Gillingham training is not a program. It's an approach to teaching. So it is an approach to teaching, and then it works for kids who have learning disabilities, specifically dyslexia. So while other kids may benefit, such as kids who have dyscalculia and the likes, dysgraphia and the likes, yes, but it actually works more with kids who have dyslexia, and then it uses the multisensory approach to be able to teach. Now, I would also recommend, which is actually one of the Orton-Gillingham approved training, which is CALT, that's Certified Academic Language Therapist. So that's a very good one. So ALT is a good one, but these are not local trainings. Now, what we do as Inclusive Classroom Nigeria is to say, okay, I have been privileged to be able to access this. So let me democratize this same opportunity. And that's why I train my volunteers. I will volunteer in Inclusive Classroom Nigeria, those in the training department. So we do trainings, and then the same principles are explained, and then the same individuals are able to also teach kids who have these learning disabilities. So that is what we do. So for me, for now in Nigeria, I cannot say that this is a specific place where you should go, because I keep saying that for us in Nigeria, yes, we may have big organizations who are doing amazing things, but from what I know, we are still at the cradle stage. So we don't have enough empirical studies on dyslexia in Nigeria, just a few. So we needed to understand that any intervention should be research. My own standard, let me just say, I always believe that every intervention program should have evidence from research. So, and we are positive of research. So, but if there is any organization who got training, and I don't want to mention any other organization, so it won't look as if it's promotional, but any organization who had got this quality training also, I think they are good places too. But without any form of bias, I would not want to mention any for now. Thank you.
All right. So I don't know, but this podcast is a huge chunk of our audience are teenagers. So I wanted to know if there's somebody listening or someone will be listening to this in the future and they say, oh, okay, I think I want to be actively involved in dyslexia awareness and I want to be a part of the vision of Inclusive Nigeria. What are the steps he or she would take? Is this Inclusive Classroom Nigeria open to receiving volunteers, open to receiving people who want to join the vision?
Yeah, apparently we are open. We receive volunteers consistently, and the process is just very simple. There's a form to fill, and it's pro bono, so you don't need to pay, and we don't pay also. We don't make any payments for anyone. So we do. We are two. We have the mother organization is Inclusive Classroom Nigeria. Now there is the non-for-profit, which is also Inclusive Classroom for Dyslexia. When we Learners with Dyslexia Foundation, which is actually registered as a non-for-profit incorporated trustee. So the point is this: we allow that, and for a teenager who is listening to this, I think the major thing he or she may not be required to come for training. I think he or she should still continue with his studies. I'm at the point of completing my master's degree, so I'm still going for more further postgraduate program. So that is to say that apparently you should focus on other trainings. But if there's anyone who has finished a level outside high school and is willing to volunteer, you could just log into our website, inclusivenigeria.org, or just any of our social media handle, and can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. That's fine. Or reach out to our page on LinkedIn. So I have our page on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So that's one. But my word to teenagers who are struggling with reading is that, yes, I have this quote to say that most of our teachers are struggling as much as the learners. So you should not blame your teachers to say, okay, the teacher cannot teach you. No, your teacher may I wish your teacher had the right information, that your teacher would be more empowered to be able to help you. So in that regard, be open. I wish there is, we are working on providing more content out there, that anyone who is even, who can just view like just a video is able to understand some of these techniques that we used to teach, so then they can practice it themselves and then move on. So because we understand that we are limited by distance and then resources is not enough to reach out to everyone. So in the meantime, I just wish everyone well, and I hope that just keep learning. But the challenge is there are so many false information about dyslexia out there on the internet, and you have to be careful about what you learn. So, but if you just stick to the International Dyslexia Association, I think they have enough resources that you could benefit with, both as a parent, as an educator, or as an individual with dyslexia. Thank you.
All right. One more thing before we go. I understand that you've mentioned that there are a lot of information out there. And for teenagers that are still curious, are there any books that you feel like, oh, okay, these are books that you like, or in your own opinion, you feel like they have good information that they can read? Any recommendations at all for us?
Okay, yeah, I've read a lot of books on dyslexia, and some are easy to read and some are very difficult to read. And understanding that age group and the vocabulary used in the book and all of that. So I would always recommend still back to the International Dyslexia Association, the website. I rarely visit the website now, but I know the website is something I can always refer to now, because on the website you have so many infographics and so many other things you could see yourself that would help. Now, a popular book that I can always recommend is Speech to Print. That's for educators. For individuals and for parents, probably overcoming dyslexia. That's also a very good book, or any of David Kilpatrick books on phonological awareness. So it exposes you to the fundamentals of phonological awareness, and then helps you to be able to understand how to build yourself on it. So that's just it. But the challenge is that all of these books would also require that you read more and then get access to some other information. And the challenge also, again, is the vocab. Some of the vocabulary used in the words are not things we are familiar with. So when you see comprehension. Your understanding of comprehension may just be an aspect of English that we teach in Nigeria, but it's actually much more than that. So fluency, you may be thinking, okay, fluency is the ability to be able to speak English correctly, but no, it's not. It's more than that. So it will expose you to some other of these nitty-gritties that are foundation for the reading experience and how to better understand the process. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Stephen Emmanuel. Is there any last words you have for us before we go today? Any last words at all?
Yeah, generally to the public, let's keep raising awareness. Everyone can do that. The history of anything about dyslexia awareness has always been stronger with parents. So including in our countries too, some organizations that pioneer this are actually individuals who have first-hand experience with their kids. So, and then they were curious and then they started and like, wow. So just like I also had, my experience was not with any child, but it was a lived experience. So practical experience saying, okay, wow. So please tell someone to tell someone, and then you keep spreading the word. Up until now, as much as many people know, some people call me professor of dyslexia or like a dyslexia ambassador and all of that, yet many people still do not understand dyslexia. So I still got a message recently with a friend of mine who shared some of our content, and then she was being asked questions on dyslexia, and then she says, Stephen, I'll start referring people to you again because I cannot answer some of those questions. So that's to say that we are limited. So many people need to know about this. That's one. If you are there and you have symptoms of dyslexia, that's not the end of the world. That's not all. You have so many skills, you have so many things you could do. So please be open and then be willing to learn. I wish you can be exposed to the science of reading and then the structured literacy procedures to be able to understand how learning works for you and how to gain a mastery of that. For teachers, please be open for continuous professional development. We do a lot for teachers, and so many organizations around the world, but please be careful and verify that it's actually the right procedures. So please be open to learn more, and then it will help your teaching and learning process. It will reduce frustration. Teachers are frustrated, I must say. So it will reduce a lot of frustration. And then to parents, your child having dyslexia does not mean he or she is a witch or is demonic or some
or has a mental condition.
Exactly, that we have attributed dyslexia to in Nigeria, but that just says that you have a special child. So, and understand that this kid is unique and is different, and then can be built, can be developed. So that's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Stephen. It was lovely having you on our podcast. And I don't know, hopefully in the future, we bring you back for another episode on dyslexia awareness. I hope you have a wonderful week. Please send my regards to everybody in Inclusive Classroom Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful week, sir. All right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Do have a blessed day, sir.
You too. Bye, sir.
Thank you for listening. If you have been blessed by this topic, please share with your friends and also drop reviews on the community page or our email. You can also share with us burdens on your heart or topics you would want us to talk about. Feel free to give to promote the spread of this podcast by partnering with us on our website at allthingsdenpodcast.disha.page. Thank you for your constant support. See you next week.